I am attorney Coral Plez, the host of this show. And Money Talks is brought to you by Columbia Savings and Loan. So shout out to Columbia Savings and Loan for sponsoring our show. Um, we talk about everything that's money related, anything at all that relates to money. And I started a series a few weeks back where we were talking about estate planning and any matters related to estate planning. And that is such a broad topic that the way that I'm going to do it is just talk a little bit about some matters that relate to estate planning, and then there'll maybe some weeks in between that we take a break and talk about other things, and then circle back to talking about matters that relate to estates. So far, we had a show where we talked a lot about guardianships. That actually is something that ties to a lack of an estate plan in some instances. And we started talking a few weeks ago a little bit about wills. So there's other things that we could talk about: power of attorney for healthcare, general power of attorney, life insurance, trusts, all of those things that we will eventually touch on. But today, I wanted to circle back and just talk a little bit further about wills and to expand upon what we started a few weeks back. So, in a way, this is a continuation of one of the prior shows. And we talked very generally, like, what is a will? Why is a will important? Then there were a couple other topics that we broke into: how to prevent people from fighting over your will, and items that married couples really should discuss before you go to meet with an estate planning attorney. So hopefully we'll get a chance to get to all of that today. But I do want to have matters very open and make sure that the listeners, the audience can call in. So I'm going to give the number right at the top of the show here: 414-444-5250. That's the number to call if you'd like to weigh in with questions, comments, life experiences that you want to share. We want everyone to, you're invited to come and join the discussion as we talk through matters that relate to estate planning. Today, more specifically, topics about wills. Um, so, just as a refresher, okay, just some of the basics. What is a will? Sometimes it's called a last will and testament. It's a legal document that describes how you would like your property and other assets to be distributed after your death. So that's just the basic description of what is a will. Some of the language in the will that'll sound a little bit strange, so we just want to talk people talk as relates to the show so that people understand what we're talking about. You'll see in the will they refer to someone as a testator. A testator is just the person who creates the will. That's the person who the will belongs to. And if you see the word executor or you hear the word executor, sometimes that's also referred to as a personal representative. So that is basically just the person who is appointed to carry out the wishes that are set forth in the will. Beneficiaries, that's just a fancy word for heirs. These are the people who inherit gifts or other assets by terms of the will. What are the benefits of having a will? Well, so you can decide where your assets go after your death. And if you have no will, you die intestate, meaning that you did not have a will. So that's the legal term for dying without a will, is intestate. And as I said before, if you die without a will and you think you have no will, rest assured the state of Wisconsin imposes a will upon you based on the statutes, the state law. So if you want to be the person to control your will and you control your assets and who inherits them after your death, then it is important that you create a will or some other estate planning tool that allows you to say where your assets are going to go. And we'll talk more about those different tools as the weeks to come. Okay. So last time I gave a celebrity example. I talked about the late, the great, the honorable Mr. Prince Rogers Nelson. And I, hold him in such high esteem. Even after his death, he was my favorite artist. but there were some things that he failed to do in terms of planning that resulted in a situation that may not have been what his wishes would have been had he created a will. Yeah, we talked about it a little bit last time that Prince died without a will. And so his estate, which was worth 200 or 300 million dollars,
Right.
so we're talking a lot of money, and it ended up being divided between his siblings, and so on. So we talked
Wow.
about that a little bit last time with respect to him. But what I wanted to talk about today is another celebrity example. Chris, oh Lord help me. Prince. That's what I get for giving him all those titles before. The late, the great, the
The late,
honorable
the great.
Mr. Prince Rogers Nelson. Okay. Also known as Prince. He didn't have a wife when he died. He didn't have children, at the time that he died. Okay. So today I'm going to talk about another celebrity example. And Jermaine, this might be before your time, okay?
Mhm.
But I'm going to talk about the famous soul singer Johnny Taylor,
Johnny
okay?
Taylor, yes.
Yeah. So now I'm a Generation X person. I'm a Gen Xer. So I don't know how many people listening would remember Johnny Taylor. I know at one time I had inquired as to the demographics of the show, like who's listening, who am I talking to?
Yeah.
And I was told adults between the ages of 25 to 54. And I'll tell you that whenever I'm on the show and people call in, I have the distinct impression that I'm talking to more of a mature audience. I don't
Yeah.
think I'm talking to 25-year-olds necessarily.
So Johnny Taylor had that song "Who's Making Love," right?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Well, to your old lady.
Why you were out? Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of his songs. He also was very popular for that song Disco Lady.
Disco Lady.
Now that was the mid 70s.
Yeah.
So he was kind of a giant of the disco era. So the people who are listening, I don't know, like if you are older Gen Xers or baby boomers, you know who Johnny Taylor was and is. If you are millennials or Generation Y listening, then you may have heard him being played by your parents or your grandparents. In my case, my parents played Johnny Taylor, my mother in particular. So I grew up listening to his music as a child of the 70s. So I'm familiar with Johnny Taylor from the disco era. All right, so why am I bringing him up? Because he passed away in the year 2000 and he had an estate that was worth $1.3 million. So that's an estimate. And okay, so it's not the hundreds of millions of dollars that Prince was worth, but that's still a sizable amount of money that you have to decide what's going to happen to it.
Right.
So in his case, he was only 66 years old when he passed away. And now maybe he thought, hey, I'm only 66. I'm not worried about an estate plan. I'm not worried about a will. And a lot of times people get that wrong because they think that drafting a will, that's for very elderly people to do right before they die. No, actually, it's not good to wait so long to do it, because if you are very elderly when you draft your will, and if perhaps you may be unwell, at the time that you draft your will, you leave that will subject to challenge by other people that may not appreciate or approve of the terms that you have set forth in the will. So it would have been a good thing. Hindsight is always a good thing, I guess, but he was only 66 years old. I've lived long enough at least to know that that's not old. The 25-year-olds might think that's old. The 35-year-olds might even think that's old, but that's really not old. And he died suddenly. He had a heart attack and he passed away. And that's how it went. So the reason that he's an interesting example to discuss today is because he had 6 children, right, with 4 different women. Um, 2 of the children were born before he ever married. So one was with his high school sweetheart. Another was with, a woman that he met in his young adulthood. Then he became married, right? And then he had 2 children with his first wife. And then they got divorced and he married again. And he had 2 more children with his second wife. So that's a total of 6 children, and he acknowledged paternity for all 6 of those, during his lifetime. And the children, and I'm referring to them as children, but we're talking about adults that are, senior citizens at this point. But I'm using the word children for sake of just the description that they were born of Mr. Johnny Taylor. Okay, so he acknowledged these six children during his lifetime, and he made sure that they all knew one another, and so that was important to them, as a family. They've talked about this publicly and said, yeah, we all, knew that even though these first two were born before he got married, we knew that that was our sister and our brother, and it was important to him that we all know one another. So they all did, and so they grew up knowing one another, and they knew that they were all siblings. So you would think, right, that at the time that he passed away, knowing that he had these six children that he acknowledged, that his estate would be divided equally, right? Evenly amongst these six. Because in Wisconsin, you would say, well, that's what the laws of intestate succession would require, that if here's this person who passed away and he was not married at the time and there was no will in place, that his six children would inherit in equal shares. That's what the law, the statutory will that's imposed in Wisconsin. Now, Johnny Taylor wasn't in Wisconsin. I'm just saying for sake of discussion because
Right.
I talk about Wisconsin law. And not so much about laws from other states.
Right.
But in this case, you have to say, wait a minute, not so fast, because it got a little bit messy. Now, with his $1.3 million estate, if you divided it evenly amongst those six, they would have gotten a little over $200,000 each, or approximately $200,000 each. There's always expenses associated with administering an estate, even if it's just simply, hiring the attorney to do the paperwork and so on and so on. So in this case, that was what they anticipated, that, well, we're sorry, we grieved the loss of our father, but, a $200,000 bump, this is what he's leaving us. Okay, I'll take it. Well, the problem is, um, after he passed away and they opened the court proceedings to handle his estate, which mostly consisted of properties. I think out of that 1.3 million, the bulk of that money represented the value of a home that he owned. And I guess there were some other maybe accounts and so forth that had a little bit of money in them. But it was basically the house that he owned that was the greatest asset of the estate. So there they were in court. And then in walks another person who claimed that she was one of the daughters of Johnny Taylor. And across the courtroom, there was another gentleman that said, well, actually, I'm a son of Johnny Taylor. And then eventually, a third person showed up. So three more people came in and they said that, nope, we are children of Johnny Taylor, and you cannot move forward with this estate without us. We want our equal share of whatever it is you're about to divide. Now, if that wasn't challenging enough, another legal issue arose. I've never seen anything happen like this, but I don't do family law really. So, but Johnny Taylor's second wife, I mentioned her earlier. I didn't mention anybody by name, but she was the mother of at least two of the children that he acknowledged. The two of them were married for 26 years. And so the divorce, unfortunately, they did get divorced and they separated in 1996, but had such a long court battle over this divorce that it wasn't finalized until the year 2000. So 4 years in court fighting over a divorce. I mean, that's a lot. That's a long time to fight. And so what ended up happening, because I think I also mentioned that he died in the year 2000. He died about 1 month after the finalization of his divorce. So he spent the last 4 years of his life in court with a long, bitter battle with eventually with an ex-wife. And so it is said that um, it had to have just really weighed on him going through this divorce, because ultimately when it settled and there was a final court order, from the divorce, the ex-wife was awarded 50%, a 50% share in Johnny Taylor's estate. So, in addition to whatever else she may have gotten in this divorce, to get 50% of someone's estate when you're no longer married to them. Now, granted, it was a 26-year marriage and they did have two children, but he also had other children, right? But she was granted by court order 50% of whatever it is. So, the reason I'm really emphasizing that is because when we're talking about a $1.3 million estate, it sounds like a lot of money. But then when you talk about dividing it among six people, well, now it's a whole lot less. Then when you say potentially to divide it between nine people, now it's a whole lot less. And now when you're talking about dividing it between 10 people, one of which that's going to take 50% of whatever it is, now you're talking about a whole lot less, right? So this thing got messy. Um, as I said, the house was the largest asset, which was, from what I read from my research, valued at about $1.2 million. So you would think, okay, well, two things have to happen, right? You either have to stipulate that these three people that walked in and said, hey, I'm 30 years old. I don't know you. I've never met you in my life before, but I'm your brother or I'm your sister or whatever the case may be. You either have to agree that they are or they have to prove that they are, right? So Johnny Taylor's kids just felt like, well, we don't know you. We've never heard of you. We've never seen you before. So we're not going to just stipulate that you are our sibling. We're going to say that you have to prove it. You prove it any way that you can. So what do? You go for DNA testing. Now, DNA testing hasn't been around that long, relatively speaking, but in the early 2000s, yeah, I mean, it was there, and it was something you can utilize. But from what I understand, it's easier to do DNA testing if you are establishing a connection between a parent and a child. Well, in this case, Mr. Taylor was already dead and buried. Okay. So what they did was what they call siblingship DNA testing by working to test the siblings out against one another. So you take someone who was a known child of Johnny Taylor and then compare their DNA to these three people that walked in and said, yep, by the way, he's our father too. So when you do that, apparently it takes a long time for that type of testing to come back. And when we come back from the break, we're going to talk about this a little bit more because all of this relates to the need to sell that house, to liquefy this estate, to pay the debts, to pay the creditors, to pay the attorneys, to pay everybody, and to try to have something left over for the heirs. So this is Money Talks with Attorney Coral, and I'm bringing this up. We'll talk a little bit more after the break about why. Okay, thank you. We'll see you soon.
When it comes to advertising, we at Mary H. Bryant Radio TV Print LLC can build a strong relationship with your customers. Mary H. Bryant's traditional strength is in delivering your announcement frequently. We go where your prospects go. We don't care. At work, in the car, at home with television, through radio, television, print, and billboards, we reach your prime prospects numerous times. Let's face it, getting your announcement through to the prospects these days is a challenge. We can focus your advertising on your best prospects by age, sex, income, and psychographics. And this can really help you move your products and services quickly in order to address the retail strategy. Let Mary H. Bryant Radio TV Print reach your prospects before they even enter the buying arena. We will make your announcement take center stage and you'll beat the competition. So increase your quarterly profits today by calling 414-463-6977. 414-463-6977.
The Trump economy was a disaster for Black America. He prioritized the wealthy and big business, not us, giving them tax breaks while we got left behind. Under Trump, hundreds of thousands of Black Americans lost health insurance in the middle of a pandemic. And don't forget the division, the violence, and disrespect we faced while he was in charge. Now, he's coming after our voting rights. And if he's president again, Trump vowed to be a, quote, dictator who would get revenge. We can't go back. President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris are working hard for Black America. They sent $1,400 cash relief checks when they were needed most. Our wages are up. We've got millions of new good-paying jobs, and the cost of insulin is capped at $35 for seniors. There's more to do, but it's clear that on the economy, Black America is getting ahead with President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris.
I'm Joe Biden, candidate for president, and I approve this message.
Paid for by Biden for President.
The Center for Teaching Entrepreneurship presents its third annual Big Head Soiree, Thursday, May 16th at the Marcus Performing Arts Center in the Bradley Pavilion. I'm Andrea Williams, and I'll be your host for this spectacular event. It's designed to salute the co-founder, Miss Radonna Rogers, as she loved to wear big hats, and this is one way we honor her. We will also celebrate and recognize the accomplishments of Milwaukee's leaders in entrepreneurial ventures. So, ladies, this is the time to wear your big hat, and guys, your stylish fedora. You will be treated to a delectable dinner and the sounds of Soul Sirius starting at 5:30. The program will begin at 7 with more entertainment and the awards program. Tickets are just $75. Go to Eventbrite using BHS 24 or call 414-788-8104. That's 414-788-8104. This event will kick off the spring season, so don't miss it.
You're listening to WNOV 860 and W293CX 106.5 Milwaukee.
Welcome back to Money Talks with Attorney Coral, sponsored by Columbia Savings and Loan. Before we went to break, I was talking about the estate debacle, and that's what I'm going to call it, with the late Johnny Taylor, all because of a failure to plan. So that's what I'm really trying to emphasize or get across to the audience this morning, is the importance of having an estate plan. I'm just using this celebrity example as an example, so that people can understand that this really, it's important and it's something that matters. So I'd like to just give the number again, call in with any questions or comments if you would like to join the conversation, 414-444-5250. So before we went to break, I was talking about the house of Johnny Taylor having been the largest asset of the estate. The house was estimated to have been worth about $1.2 million. So you think, okay, $1.2 million. We're going to go ahead and we're going to sell, and we will, everybody will be okay. Everybody will get something out of this. Well, the house needed to be sold in order to liquefy this estate, in order to satisfy everyone who needed to be satisfied. So in readings, though, that I did with respect to the court proceedings on this matter, they were not able to appoint an administrator of the estate, or a personal representative is another word for that, because the siblings were fighting about who should be the person appointed. So the judge decided, instead of, well, I'm not going to appoint because this kid over here said that they don't want this other person to be in charge of the estate. Therefore, I'm going to appoint an attorney who has no connection, no relation to anyone here, to actually oversee the estate. So yeah, that's the thing. But then this is another person who's going to have to pay, or have to be paid out of the assets of the estate. So they're fighting and going back and forth with all these court proceedings, delayed the ability to get the home sold. So we do have a caller. I'm going to break into what I'm saying right now to take that call, and then we'll continue after the call. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, this is so complicated. And my question really sounds stupid now, but when you do a will, and even if he hadn't done a will, he would have had to have taken in consideration that divorce decree and what she was going to be getting, because it has a huge effect on the outcome of, what's left.
I think you're right. Yes.
And so, that, boy, I'm telling you, what a nightmare. But I'm saying, and the kids that happen to come along and say, I'm a part of this, and once you get the DNA testing, but if they had been smart and not greedy and just say, okay, go on with the sale of the home, at least that part will be done, and then we'll hassle out the rest of this of what needs to be taken care of.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Oh, I know exactly what you're saying. In fact, when I was reading about this estate, I really got the direct impression that one of the heirs, one of the ones that came after the fact, one of those three that were unknown, I got the distinct impression that she was trying to run out the clock and run through the estate and just make sure that that people got less. That was just my impression, but go ahead with your comment.
Okay. And see, when you do that, what are you achieving? And that's why people's lives are so complicated. And being a guardian, now, okay, if you're like 65 years old, you're still in pretty good health. You have kids, you've been divorced, have some other kids, and this, that, and the other. But you could put this in a trust, a living trust. Is there such a thing, right?
There is such a thing.
Which means as long as I'm living, this will is here, and you can get an affidavit that you're in your right sound mind. And these are the children that you acknowledge that are your children. Now, if he had a Saturday night affair and didn't know a kid came out of this, and all of a sudden, now this kid wants to be put in, how does that affect that trust?
Well,
that was my question.
Yeah, so that is a complicated question. So for something like that, I would ask you, if you would really like to or need to know that answer, to contact my law office, and then I would speak about that privately. That's not something that because there's lots of variables and lots of factors, and it depends on the trust and what the language. I'm sorry?
Right. The reason why I'm asking this is because you know of situations where people now are really talking in the community about trust.
Right.
They really are. And so, and then they sit down and they bring up all these other variables that's in their lives.
Right. And that's the point, that it's a case by case, because everybody is just factually a little bit different. And I'm actually going to do a show where we really more specifically hone in and talk about trusts. Trusts are so much more complicated. I purposely left that out for the most part of today's discussion. But something like this, that with what you're saying, is so fact intensive based on those individual circumstances, that's the sort of thing that I would give a consultation on privately.
Okay. Right. And see, they have to remember what that word says, trust.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So you have to trust that the information is correct to the best of your knowledge.
Right.
And not leave people hurt, And it seems like the greediest people are the ones that contribute nothing to you. They just come up out of the whatever and they want their equal share. Well, what is that?
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, that happens. Thank you so much for calling in. Looks like we have another caller. Caller, go ahead.
Good morning, Miss Cora.
Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Mr. Rideout. Good morning, Milwaukee.
Good morning there, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Tyrone W. speaking. Miss Cora, missed you the last couple of weeks there. Out getting it in there, but I'm glad you're back.
Yes. And I missed you guys too. I'm sorry that I was away.
No need to be sorry. No, I mean, business is business. And,
no. I wish it were business. It was unfortunately my sister, who is only in her 50s, that had a medical incident that just shook the family.
My condolences. My personal condolences as well as the community, I'm sure.
Yeah, but she's alive and well, and she's going to make a full recovery.
Glad
but
to
it
hear
was
that.
important that she had some estate planning documents, so it was relevant even in her case, with her never been sick before. So she's just a glaring example of what can happen. but she made sure to have medical power of attorney, naming her eldest daughter as a person who could make decisions while she was sedated and couldn't make decisions for herself. So it was just a real life example of what I talk about every day.
Well,
so, but anyway, Tyrone, sorry about that. You go
no,
ahead
no,
with
you're
your
fine.
question.
You're fine. I'm just saying that's I mean, just being man up, just being cast into the fire even as we speak.
Right.
I mean, daily. I mean, just like I said, with my mom having a couple of falls there, it's really hard to say, with excuse me, the different names of it all, Parkinson's, dementia, Alzheimer's, what have you there, but you can see where the thought process is deteriorating though.
Sure.
But long story, I didn't want to suck all the out the show about, just on what you're talking about. And I know we had touched on Tulsa a few weeks back.
Yes, we did.
But I wanted to, kind of downplaying the court side of everything. I mean, even going back to profit sharing. I mean, we see where, well, of course, 40 acres and a mule wasn't going to do it for me. You would have had to give me like 1,000 acres and 500 mules.
Right.
40 acres. But I mean, we see even with the sharecroppers. I mean, as companies are buying their own shares and stocks and stuff like that, to boost their own profits and stuff like that. But even with the sharecroppers that lost property and land and stuff, I mean, that just did what they needed to do and got stripped of things. It really takes us how we look at Tulsa and how they just bombed Tulsa and just took all that wonderful stuff away from us that we had there. I mean, it just seems like we just go through this and repetitions over and over and over again, and we don't get our just due. So, I mean, even when we wind up in court, does the justices and the apparently they're not seeing something, I mean, the blindfold is on that woman up there holding that scale and everything, and it's almost like telling her, don't believe what don't believe what you see, and we don't care about what you think, a blindfolded woman holding the scale there. So I don't know. I'm having a hard time understanding why the courts can't seem to get some of this right. But I didn't want to take you off the wrong path on anything. But just go ahead, address that. With the sharecroppers and I guess people that have had land and stuff there and still haven't been able to get it right over years and years and years, with Tulsa as the backdrop in the back of our minds and memories. Love you. Thank you very much. We'll talk.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you for calling in
All right.
again. And I sure do appreciate your comments. It's interesting to relate that to what we're talking about here today, because as I was reading about this court case, I kept thinking, why didn't they just sell the house? Like, why are they going to just let it sit? Because this estate went through court, like the process from start to finish was years. It wasn't weeks, it wasn't months, it certainly wasn't days. It was literally years before they got this thing resolved. And I kept wondering, well, the house just sitting there is costing money. Houses cost money if they're just sitting. If it's because of the taxes that have to be paid, or depending upon what state you're in, you may have to have utilities on. You can't have a house in, let's say, Wisconsin. This one wasn't. I don't know where it was, but you can't have a home here and let it sit all winter without getting the heat on and making sure the pipes aren't going to burst. You got to have the water flowing, and you've got to take care of a home. So a home just sitting costs money. And so I kept thinking, oh, there was also a $100,000 tax liability. So that's a lot of money to owe to the IRS. And if you can sell the property to liquefy the money and pay the IRS, because they're going to always get theirs. They're first in line, in just about any situation. They just slap a lien on the property, and then they know all they have to do is wait. Eventually, it's going to either be sold or refinanced or something, and they are going to be the first to get paid out of it. So to not have sold the home right away, I was questioning the court's rationale. So it's kind of with what Mr. Tyrone was saying. When are the courts going to get it right? I wondered about that in this instance. Why didn't she allow them to go forward, sell the house, at least pay the IRS off? Because $100,000 debt sitting there unpaid collects interest and additional penalties. And I don't know how much it ultimately was by the time it was paid off, but it was more than $100,000 because it didn't get paid when the demand was made. It was paid sometime later. So the estate was just hemorrhaging money. Um, that you've got the attorney that represented the first 6 children, and then there was fortunately at least just one other attorney that represented the 3 new ones that came. But then there was an attorney that represented the former spouse and her interest in the matter, and there was an attorney that was appointed the administrator of the estate. The DNA tests cost money to have that performed. And there was a long waiting process for the DNA results to come back. So all the while they're waiting and waiting for those results to come back. When they finally do come back, it is determined that they are inconclusive. So they still couldn't even say with certainty that these 3 were part of the estate. I don't know why everybody didn't just put their heads together and go to a mediation and just try to duke it out before the entire assets of the estate were squandered. But no, that didn't happen. They went back and they decided to do another round of DNA tests. Now, there was some talk in the midst of all of this about potentially exhuming the body of Johnny Taylor in order to take a small DNA sample from him to compare to these 3 who were claiming to be his children. And so there were mixed feelings about that amongst his children. There was one of them that said, absolutely not. I do not want my father's body exhumed. I do not want him to have to, go through that. This is sacred to us. He is dead and buried. Leave him alone. Um, obviously the benefit of it would have been easier, clearer DNA evidence, right? To either firmly prove or disprove that these were heirs or not heirs. This siblingship DNA is more complicated, and the initial tests failed to allow them to say conclusively that these were the children. So, those results got thrown out. So there was another one of the heirs that said, no, go ahead. Let's exhume his body. At least we'll know. We'll put some finality to this. And, I'm not, opposed to it. Go ahead. So they were fighting amongst themselves. Even about that, they couldn't agree. Well, ultimately, the court came along and said, well, all right, I'm going to make a ruling on that. This one wants the body exhumed. This one is saying, no, don't exhume the body. And nobody can agree on anything as relates to this. So they decided that the judge ruled that since the body was buried in another state, that would take care of itself, that she didn't have any authority to order that his body be exhumed from another state. So that was one way to at least resolve that issue. So, but every one of these things that I'm mentioning was some sort of motion brought before the court. So there's more fees, there's more costs, there's more time, money, 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 okay, being spent in ways that, again, I didn't know Johnny Taylor, but I just can't imagine that he worked hard all of his life and accumulated a $1.3 million fortune at the time of his death, that he would have wanted it to be squandered away from his children, to have to pay scientists in some lab to do DNA testing, or to have to pay this attorney, this attorney, this attorney, and that attorney, because there had to have been at least 4 lawyers involved in this. And then there's court costs and filing fees and all of these things that his hard-earned money ended up going to pay for, rather than being allowed to be dispersed amongst his children. So money was always top of the agenda at all of the court appearances, because every time they'd come back, motion after motion being filed, fight after fight being had, they'd come back to court. And the first thing that had to be discussed was what the current status is of the attorney's fees, what's owed to this attorney or that attorney. And trust me, I, of all people, don't have any issue with attorneys making money, right? Because we work hard and you should be well compensated for a job well done. All I'm saying is that spend some money on the front end and pay the attorney on the front end to put an estate plan together for you, so this type of squabbling after the fact doesn't have to occur. There were numerous delays, even with the second round of DNA testing. Finally, the ex-wife convinces the judge to let her sell the house. And Then she named herself as the realtor, which apparently the divorce decree allowed her to do. I don't know how she I don't know how she managed to get absolutely so much power and control in that divorce, but that's a whole other topic. So of course, then the potential heirs objected to her being the realtor. Some of them did, some of them didn't, but that's the other thing. When you've got so many people involved, you're not going to have 9 or 10 people all agree. Even if you get 6 to agree, you'll have 3 that don't, and that's what happened here. The 3 kids that came after the fact objected to her being named as the realtor and objected again to her being able to sell the home. So the court, in essence, reversed itself again and said that, okay, right now, she's the kids who objected were able to block the sale of the home again. So the home continued to sit, the expenses continued to mount. Finally, um, the DNA results came back, and there was yet another hearing scheduled on this matter. Um, and incidentally, again, this is part of what I read up on. The hearing was actually for September 11th, 2001. And we all know what day that was in American history. And so that whole situation ended up delaying the court process even further. So who could have seen that coming? But eventually they did get back in court, and it was determined that the 3 newcomers were actually, in fact, biologically proven by the DNA that they were, in fact, the children of the late Johnny Taylor, and they were entitled to inherit under the estate along with his other 6 children that he had acknowledged during his lifetime. So after the home was sold and the ex-wife took her 50% share of the home, the 9 children left. And again, this is after the IRS got paid, all the expenses of administration were paid, everything was paid. Each of his 9 children then were given a check, or were written a check just over $2,000. That's what each of them individually ended up getting from the estate. So imagine you're thinking, it's bad enough you lost your parent, but they left you some money, so to speak. It was really a house, but it had to be sold. You're thinking that you're going to inherit about $200,000, and you end up, after all is said and done, getting about $2,000. So $2,000 versus $200,000. I don't even know what to say. I see you shaking your head, Jermaine.
Sound like some zeros missing to me.
It's definitely some zeros missing. Too many zeros missing. So this is what we do not want to happen. This is what we do not want to happen. So when I'm saying it's important to do estate planning, this is a glaring real life example. Now, maybe all of us don't have a $1.3 million estate, but if you've got $100,000 estate and you want to leave that to your son or your daughter, or to your son and your daughter, and then it ends up that there's all this dispute going on, and they end up walking away with $1,000 rather than $100,000, that was not what you would have wanted. That's just it. That cannot be what you would have wanted. So what do? You plan, okay? And again, some of this is review that we talked about before, things that you can do to avoid relatives fighting over your estate. Well, you can have a will. That's one thing. And I know the the woman that called and talked about trust, that's another tool, a little more of a complicated tool. So not necessarily part of today's discussion, but that can be a relevant factor depending upon your circumstances. It looks like we have another person calling in, so I'm going to go ahead and take the caller, and then we can come back and talk about some of the things that I wanted to suggest in terms of ways to avoid relatives fighting over your estate. Caller, go ahead, please. Hello, caller.
Hi. Hi, I was calling relative to the estate planning.
Yes.
Believe it or not, that's what I'm in the process of doing right now.
Okay.
I have hired an attorney to help me, but I have a question here that I only have life insurance for $5,000. And at that time, years ago when I got it, that was sufficient, but now it's not enough. So I need to give my daughter an additional $5,000 because she's the total beneficiary of this life insurance policy.
Yes.
So my question is, how do I give her this money? Do she put it in the bank with me as the beneficiary, or what is the best way to add to this?
Well, I'll tell you, normally I would say give me a call for, a private consult with some recommendations. But the reason that I'm not able to suggest that to you right now is because you're represented by counsel. So that was
Well, I'm in the process of getting information together, but I have not given her the money yet, but I was going to do it before I go to this counsel.
Okay. Well, it's certainly.
Or should I wait until I let the lawyer tell me? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. What I'm saying is I'm an attorney, right? And you're saying that you are in consultation with another attorney right now. So it wouldn't be proper for me to weigh in with any advice on air.
Well, I
anyway.
haven't asked
Okay,
her
but
this.
hold
I'm
on,
just
hold on.
gathering information.
Okay, but you're going to go meet with that person, then this is the perfect question that you should pose to that individual. That's all I'm saying.
But I wanted to know if I should do it before, because I haven't done it. So I should wait until I meet with her to do this, because I was going to give it to my daughter like in the next couple of days.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how soon you're going to meet with that person. So again, I'm not really able to give you advice because there's not an attorney-client relationship with us. I would offer you a consult to contact my office, but it sounds to me like you're already in consultation with someone. So I can't interfere with that by giving you any advice. I'm really sorry. I know it sounds a little bit complicated, but just talk to the person that you're working with.
That's what I wanted to know, because believe it or not, I'm in the car now on my way to go to the bank to give her this, and I wasn't sure if I should do it before or wait and let the attorney tell me. And I guess you answered my question.
That's right. So you drive safely and have a good day. But yep, talk to the attorney.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay. So we are going to take a break again. Thank you so much for joining us. This is Money Talks with Attorney Coral, sponsored by Columbia Savings and Loan. More to come after the break. Thank you so much.
Get ready, Wisconsin. The Black Child Development Institute is expanding its village statewide. Join us for an unforgettable evening of celebration and empowerment at our gala on Saturday, May 4th, 2024 at the Hilton Milwaukee City Center. Tickets are available for $150 per person and sponsorships are available. Adorn yourself in formal African attire as we celebrate this momentous occasion and the growth of our village. For more information and to purchase tickets, call 414-236-5641 or visit bcdi-wisconsin.org. That is 414-236-5641 or bcdi-wisconsin.org. Don't miss out on this unforgettable event. Together, let's build a brighter future for Wisconsin's children.
Milwaukee. This is Michelle Bryant, your host of Say Something Real. When President Joe Biden wanted to talk to Milwaukee voters, he called WNOV. and welcome President Biden to Milwaukee and to WNOV. How you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well. Had a great event downtown, and I'm at the headquarters now, and we're feeling really good. It's a great day. We have a lot of we have 1,000 volunteers going out here in Wisconsin, out of Milwaukee in particular.
So we are ready to roll in Wisconsin.
Well, I tell you what, God love you. We win Wisconsin, we win it all.
For up-to-date election information, keep it locked on WNOV 860 AM, 106.5 FM.
Milwaukee Films Black Lens program aims to foster meaningful community conversations, promote celebration, and strengthen community bonds within and beyond the cinematic setting. Black Lens was created with a singular focus to spotlight the incredible work of filmmakers of African descent by bringing their films to the Milwaukee Film Festival. These filmmakers explore the stories, the topics, and the histories that are deeply shared throughout the Black diaspora while inviting diverse audience engagement. Now celebrating its commemorative 10th year, the Black Lens program has evolved beyond the festival, offering year-round film programming. This promises even more unique cinematic experiences, honoring the rich legacy of Black film while championing the contemporary wave of Black filmmakers. For more information on the Black Lens program, go to mkefilm.org.
Hey, what to do? This is Kwabena Anton Nixon. Catch me Tuesdays through Fridays on WNOV 860 from 3 to 5 p.m. with culture, community, and conversations. Pull up, you on the porch with Kwab. That's Tuesday through Friday from 3 to 5 p.m. on the new 860 WNOV and 106.5.
WNOV 860 and W293CX 106.5 Milwaukee.
Welcome back to Money Talks with Attorney Coral. I am Attorney Coral Plez. My law firm is called the Plez Law Firm, and the phone number there is 414-247-9570. That is 414-247-9570. You can call, you can leave a voice message, or you can text to that number as well if you have questions for me regarding estate planning. I wanted to make sure I put that out there because I made reference to it a couple times earlier but didn't give the number. So it looks like we have a caller holding. Caller, please go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. You just answered my question. I just wanted the phone number.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for that. Appreciate you calling and asking that. So we were in sync one way or another. I knew I needed to say that number. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so we were talking about 5 things that you can do to avoid relatives fighting over your estate. And again, these are our recommendations, but people will sometimes fight if they don't like the outcome. This is even if you do have a will. Certainly, even more so if you don't have a will. The thing that I hate to see the most about this sort of thing is when siblings become enemies, never speaking again over this type of circumstance. And I see you nodding your head, Jermaine, so you know that this is real. It happens.
Yeah, I've
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's just happening in my family.
Yeah, see, and as young as you are, you even have experienced this.
Yeah, you see it a lot, especially at the services, like at the homegoing services, and it's just like you see all of the fighting and things like that, which is very disturbing. But everything that you saying is true because I see it a lot.
Right. So yeah, people will try to fight or dispute an estate, but they're not going to win unless there's a reason, or they're not going to win just because they don't like the will. Right? There has to be some sort of legal reason. So they can try to say that the will isn't valid for some reason. Maybe that's not my parents' signature, for instance, that sort of thing. Or maybe maybe that's their signature, but they were very medicated and they don't know what they signed, that sort of thing. Or undue influence when, maybe one child is trying to influence the parent to do something without the involvement of the other children. So that's another reason. And again, I mentioned like the capacity of the testator. So was this person well and robust and good health and sharp mind? Or were they very sick and deteriorating and barely conscious and just barely able to write out their name, but not really knowing what they're signing? So those are the sorts of things that, you take into account so that you can reduce the likelihood that people are going to fight over the estate. So one of the things that I said was, get good advice from an attorney um, to prepare a will or maybe some other estate planning tool. Could be a trust, could be, any number of things. Transfer on death deeds, all that sort of thing factors into this now. And we'll talk another time a little bit more about what that means. But you try to make sure that whatever documentation you have is well prepared so that there's no ambiguity in the will. We talked a little bit before about a no contest clause. And again, that's a clause you can put into a will that says, if you contest this, then you don't get anything. And that's, it's a legitimate clause that you are able to put into an estate planning document. Create an estate plan while the capacity of the testator is good. We talked about that. Don't let it appear that you're being influenced by someone else. We talked about that. Um, and communicate your blunt truth to your heirs. Talk to them. Let them know. It can be difficult when these sorts of things catch people by surprise, and maybe they didn't know that one sibling was going to inherit more so than the others. So all of these sorts of things are important. And again, I just used, Mr. Taylor's celebrity case as an example, just, draws the interest of people that maybe remember who he was or were fans of his career. Unfortunately, he didn't do the pre-planning that might have yielded a better result for his kids. But seems like they all loved him and they were glad to have had the experience of knowing him in their life. But $200,000 wouldn't have hurt either, I'm sure, right? So thank you so much for being here with us today. This was Money Talks with Attorney Coral, sponsored by Columbia Savings and Loan. Shout out to Columbia, celebrating 100 years of service in the community this year. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining, and looking forward to speaking to you next week. Have a wonderful week.